Yeah.
Okay, so you had mentioned banding. What
Banding.
does it mean when you say that a photo is banding? What happens?
So banding it commonly occurs when you are working around artificial light.
Right.
So when you're working with mainly like fluorescent light, LED lighting, things like that, one of the best ways to see banding in action is to look up some current sports photography, namely ones where the camera is pointed in the direction of a jumbotron or something like that. And you'll notice that the jumbotron, like the video that's on there, the image that shows up on there is all jacked up. It just doesn't look right. It looks like it's been torn to pieces.
Yeah.
That's banding. So what happens when you press the shutter button on a electronic sensor? What happens is it captures the image in an interlaced fashion. And what that means is it really quickly, from say the top right pixel across line by line, it goes down and reads them left to right, top to bottom, as fast as it possibly can. Well, the problem is when you start shooting faster than that thing can read, it will end up reading those different wavelengths of that light as different colors. And what will happen is you will end up with actual physical bands in your photo that you can't get rid of. We were talking the other day about destructive workflows. That is a destructive form of a workflow right there. There's nothing that you can really do after the fact to go in and correct that banding.
You see a lot, like if you see like a large dark area, like darker color, there's a lot of banding sometimes.
Yes.
It's the easiest way for me to be able to see it.
Yeah,
Is
and
when
banding,
it's a large open area that's kind of dark in color.
yeah, banding can happen in a lot of different forms, but traditionally, you're going to see it most when dealing with artificial lighting.
Right.
And in the applications that I've used when I'm shooting events, like when I shoot for Clay County Chamber of Commerce, the lighting that's in the Thrasher Horn
Oh yeah.
Conference Center is terrible, and it constantly flickers. So I have to take multiple exposures to make sure that I'm getting one that that has the lights.
Is that the best way to kind of fight it? Is to take multiple
Yeah, yeah. For that kind of banding, that's more of a flicker issue than a banding issue. So I just shoot it at multiple frames, and then somewhere in that frame, I get one that has it properly. The banding that I was referring to in the previous video, in terms of concert photography,
Yeah.
that's just a physical limitation of the hardware in the camera. And one way that Sony recently has learned how to combat this is by using a global electronic shutter. And what a global electronic shutter is that all of the sensor sight on that sensor expose immediately at the exact same time. So I can see.
It's more like 35 millimeter film.
Right. I can see in the future when that finally does come over to Nikon, when they release the Z9 II, that's probably going to be my biggest reason for needing to upgrade.
You'll upgrade like we talked about.
Yeah. But right now I can work around that. I don't deal with that unless I'm shooting concerts, and I've learned to kind of deal with it. I just shoot it, 1/200th of a second, and I still get some really good stuff. So
okay. Well, since we talked about banding, I guess I'll throw in, what is noise?
Noise.
Yeah. So if you look at a picture and you say there's a lot of noise in there,
Yeah.
obviously it's a photo, it's not a video or anything you're hearing. So what is the noise?
Right. So noise is digital artifacting caused by the image sensor improperly exposing an area of the photo.
Dots, little tiny dots.
Yeah, it looks like the static on your TV.
Yeah.
If you're old enough to remember when the channel went black for the night at like midnight, you would just have that snow that's on the TV.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it shows up in your images, and it's in the form of noise.
Yeah.
There are a lot of very advanced ways to combat noise these days, but noise happens when your sensor is artificially exposed to too much exposure, I guess is the best way to put it. So on your camera, you can control the shutter speed, the ISO, and the aperture. That's your exposure triangle. We're going to go into that.
We'll cover that.
Yeah, we'll cover that in another video, but just know that that's your exposure triangle. And on the ISO side of that exposure triangle, that is the one thing that introduces noise the greatest into your photos. Anytime you increase that ISO above whatever your camera's native ISO is, you start introducing noise into the picture. And it will increase as you increase your ISO. And so the best way to combat noise is to shoot at lower ISOs or to use a denoise program after the fact. I know when I'm shooting events, when I'm shooting concerts and things like that, I usually have my ISO well up above 3200 or 6400. And
Sometimes you just have to.
yeah, sometimes you just have to. You end up with a noisy picture, and you can clean it up after the fact. Another area where noise gets introduced into your photos is if you're not properly exposing your photos, and then you bring them into Lightroom or Capture One, and you start pulling your shadows up. As you start pulling your shadows up, you're going to start introducing artifacting and noise into your image that way as well.